Hey YouTube, it's your girl Dr. J, and I wanted to do a quick video response to a question I got from T1 Blue, which was an excellent question on how do you find books that are STEM based for a 5-year-old. And I thought this would be a great response to do as a video because the comment section I would have had too many comments. But plus, it's really good to be able to show people some of the resources that I'm going to be talking about. I think it's a great question because a lot of times when you see things that are specifically STEM based in science, technology, engineering, and math, a lot of times that's going to be geared towards children who are 9, 10, and over. And when you have younger children, it's really good to make sure you have things that are on their level and give them a good and gentle introduction to STEM. One great thing I actually love to use to introduce really young kids to STEM is actually Bob the Builder. I have a little series. It's a 20-book series, and it's 20 little books like this. It's UK based, and I really love it because even though it's kind of a popular character, Bob the Builder actually does a good job of introducing kids to a lot of technology that you use on construction sites and on farms. And so it really helps kids to really spark that first kind of look into technology and how we use technology. And you can have great conversations, talking about the differences between using a small cement mixer like DAJedu versus a large cement truck, and when do you make those kind of decisions. Also, they can see the difference between, what does, scoop, and a digger do versus, a towing vehicle, kind of like Lofty. So it's actually really good way to kind of first get your child understanding that a lot of times machines are built for a purpose, and what we want those things to accomplish is the way that we program them and the way that we design them. So I think Bob the Builder is a really great first introduction to kids when it comes to really helping them understand things about technology. Another thing that I like are these books by National Geographic Little Kids. This one is the Big Book of Why, and it answers tons of really really cool questions that kids have. This one is like on jungle gym. This page is about different jungle gyms and why do we call them that. Why do elevators go up and down? It's just, it just has just a lot of fun questions that kids would ask. Why do some animals hang upside down? And it's very picture heavy, which is great. So it's not going to be overwhelming for a young child. So I think these are really good. Another of those books is this one, National Geographic Little Kids, and this one is African Animals Alphabet. Another really cool book because it's going to introduce kids to some fun animals. Like this one is the dung beetle that they may not see. It has some of the kind of the more common ones, fox and giraffe, but it's going to give them some that they may not have heard before, like impala. And I really love nature science as a good first science for kids because it really it's something that they can relate to. They see animals all the time. They have a natural interest in animals and bugs and that sort of stuff. So it's going to be a great kind of starting point if you have a young child and you're trying to see exactly how you're going to introduce them into the area of STEM. And I think that it's really important to really choose your topics well with young children so that it's not overwhelming for them. For instance, one of the first things that we do with our kids is do bubble science. And so here's like a little book about, it says a book all about bubbles, and it's a let's read and find out book, but it talks to them about, all about just different information, about bubbles and how they work and how you can have bubbles, work better and that sort of stuff. So just books that are about topics that kids really care about. Another series that I like is another Discover Kids series, and it is on Change and Grow. This one is on tadpoles to frogs, but we have it on, they have one on puppies to dogs and kittens to cats, but it just goes over the life cycle of the animal. And a lot of times you can find life cycle models of frogs and butterflies and stuff for little kids to see, but it's just a really good kid-friendly series. Another book that I just love is the Berenstain Bears Big Book of Science and Nature. Now, this book was originally published in 1977, but it was republished by Dover in 2013. So it's just sent back out. But it has the more classic Berenstain Bears characters. But the science in it is really solid, and it follows a year. But it goes over different things, like this chapter is the Berenstain Bears Science Fair. And it goes over, you know, machines and how they work, the science of matter, actual facts about energy, projects and experiments. And so another thing that's really good about it is that it's a rhyming book. So it's really, even though the information is solid, the science is there, it's also fun to read for the parent. It's also fun for the parent to read it for the child. And rhyming books really help children to read books for themselves as well. So another great one that I would highly recommend to parents of young children. Speaking of rhyming books, The Cat in the Hat has tons of books that are really good for STEM. Like this one is, oh say, can you say what's the weather today? So it's a rhyming book, but it's all about the science of weather. And it's not like, you know, small stuff. Like this one, you know, they're talking about condensation. So they're going to get, you know, some really, really good stuff. It's, you know, talks about, you know, snow and ice and how that sort of weather comes about. So this is going to, Cat in the Hat series, really look, they're published by Random House. You can find them on Amazon, and they're constantly bringing out new titles. We have one about reptiles. They have one about cats that's coming out. They have some on map reading and all that sort of stuff. So those are really good books. They're fun to read. The Dr. Seuss books are always just going to be really good and really on point. If your child is into magazines, I like Ranger Rick. We have a subscription to Ranger Rick magazines. A lot of times kids like getting mail. This is produced through the National Wildlife Federation. And I actually got this via a Groupon. So I think the entire year subscription was, it was like $6 or $7. It was half price. And then I got an email today, or I got an email yesterday that said we can get an additional five magazines. So I think 5 months for $1. So just, you know, look out for deals like that. When it comes to math, these type of books I really love. Like this one is How Much is a Million, and it you know, really helps kids understand how much a million really is. But it doesn't just stop at a million. It goes up to, you know, like a billion and a trillion, and it does it in a fun way. Like this one shows like how many stars you would need to make, I think it was a million. But it talks, you know, like this one says, if you wanted to count to a million, it would take you about 23 days. So that's just a fun way to look at math and look at numbers. And this is a very gentle way to introduce your child to really large numbers like a million and a billion. But it's still going to be very kid-friendly. This book, it is Kingfisher. Kingfisher usually does really good books, and this one is about inventions, and that's why it's young child friendly, because it's going to talk about things that they're familiar with, like the telephone, and they get to see, you know, what phones were like when their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents were young. Talks about television, technology in the home, transportation, but it's just going to be small little tidbits. It's not going to be overwhelming for young children, and you can just go through the book and let them pick up things that they want to hear about. This book I love, Engineering the ABCs. This book I think is amazing because it's one of the few like basic engineering books that I've ever seen that's geared towards young children. So it talks about, you know, like A is airplane and B is bicycle and C is car and D is dolls. But it talks about, you know, somebody had to design those each of those things. They had to really think about the materials that were being used, and it really introduces them to what is engineering. So this book is, I mean, I definitely recommend it, especially if you want your child to have kind of an introduction to engineering and you're not really sure where to start or how to really explain it to them. This book is wonderful. When it comes to numbers, this is a book about fractions, and it's called Full House. It's a neat rhyming book, but it's a great introduction to kind of a little bit higher level math. Fractions would be considered higher level math for a 5-year-old, but it's written in a way that a 5-year-old could understand. They're, you know, only going up to 6 6, so 1 6 and 2 6 and 3 6, you know, and so it's really cool. But the story is fun, easy to read. It has good repetition, so your children can join in the reading with you, and it's going to introduce them to higher level math. And you would, you know, you wouldn't think that a 4 or 5-year-old would be able to understand fractions, but a book like that will allow them to do it. This is a math alphabet book. It is called G is for Google, and it introduces your child to some math words that they probably wouldn't have, ever heard of before. Like, for instance, like M is for Mobius strip. You know, you go, huh? You know, N is for nature. O is for obtuse. So it's going to give them some really good, neat information and introduce them to some words that they may not have encountered for years and years and years, but it has a very nice, good, kid-friendly definition. So those are going to be great. And I would say these last 2 books that I'm going to show you are the ones that I have been most impressed with because the stories are just phenomenal. This one is Iggy Peck, Architect, and Rosie Revere, Engineer. Just really phenomenal books. My kids want to hear these books all the time. It's a great story. The pictures are wonderful. The stories introduce them to not just, like, this one is on engineering, and it doesn't just introduce them to engineering, but really introduces them to what it is, that you can start it really as a young child. These kids are supposed to be 2nd graders, so, and it talks about, you know, how, you know, they were disappointed early, but then they, you know, went back to it and kept doing it, and they ended up falling in love with it. Iggy Peck is really good, Architect, because it's about, you know, a teacher who tells him, you know, no, you shouldn't be building because of an experience that she had, but he ends up saving the day. And it's just a really fun book. It has great illustrations. It is rhyming, but it has, you know, really high-level words that, you know, some words that your child may not have encountered in their day-to-day reading, but they're really good. They introduce them to words that are just good to use and makes their vocabulary much more exact and much more fun. And it's just it's a really fun read. I'm trying to find one of the words that, and I won't be able to find it. But like, for instance, it talks about, you know, we're trapped here. Oh my, alas, kids, goodbye. You know, and then it says, she dropped to the ground with a vague groaning sound because she fainted because the bridge went out. And it talks about words like dazed, and the kids hatched a plan, and, you know, so those are words that you may not, you know, normally really encounter in a children's book, but it really opens up their vocabulary a lot. So those are just some of the books that we have when it comes to introducing STEM to younger children, especially children around at 5 years of age. But as for a process of how to build your library or what to look for when you go to the library, start with things that your child is interested in or things that you can experiment with in your home. That would be like bubbles, colors, those sort of things. Also introducing them to human body, especially things like senses and stuff that they can truly understand, truly grasp very quickly. If they're also learning their letters, books like G is for Google or the ABCs of Engineering, that's going to really link some STEM-based information to that letter recognition, letter writing that they're already doing. if your child already has a passion for some things and you want to introduce them to some new things, definitely like Izzy Peck, architect, and Rosie Revere, the engineer, that's going to introduce them to some fields and some areas of STEM that they may not be aware of. I remember a quote that I heard when I was in college. I said, a child can't be what they can't see. And that is, phenomenal in that, a lot of times, our children may not know that there's an area that they have a passion in until they're introduced to it. And so it's a lot of times our job as parents to introduce them to a wide buffet of information, ideas, etc., so that they can figure out where their passions are going to lead them. So having a lot of different things for your child to be able to get to and explore. Start with something familiar by bringing out the technology and engineering aspects that we find in Bob the Builder, and building up from there is going to be something that's really good, and that is what I would recommend. Start at your local library, and just kind of go around and explore and pull books from here and there. Go to books that go to that math section, and introduce your child to math books that are fun stories. They're fun to read, and they're beyond their textbook that they're going to be learning just addition and subtraction from. And really help them see the fun in it. Practice some things like the Bears science book is going to have a lot of things that they can actually try themselves at home. So that's where you find things, especially things like Sid the Science Kid and that sort of stuff too. It's always going to have an aspect on there that you can try at home and do it. I would say definitely do it and go for it, but introduce your child to a lot of different areas, and they will find something that they kind of grasp and hold on to. And T1 Blue, I hope this helps, and for others, I hope this helps for you as well. This is Dr. J, and I'm out. Bye-bye.